It's too much. What am I supposed to do with this? I like to do things big here at Zorpazorp. Stupidly massive, some might say, but today, Games Workshop have really upped the ante. The brand new edition of Lord of the Rings Warhammer is here, and to celebrate, I kicked off a new section of the biggest Warhammer scenery project on YouTube, the Rohan region of the Zorpazorp Middle-earth megaboard. Helm's Deep is already looking glorious, but Rohan is also famous for another Lord of the Rings location, and when Games Workshop asked me if I wanted some Rohan scenery kits to build it, I said yes. Yes! So once again, I am sitting next to a literal mountain of plastic crack. Now, this journey all began in the last edition of Lord of the Rings Warhammer, when Games Workshop sent me 100 sprues of the Gondor ruins that I added to the very first section of the Middle-earth Zorpazorp megaboard to yield 60 square feet of Osgiliath flooded madness. That kickstarted this whole journey to build all of Middle-earth, this entire map at 28mm scale. So here we've come full circle with a brand new sprue mountain for a brand new edition. And I gotta tell you folks, this looks like a hell of a lot more than 100 sprues of Gondor ruins, but there's nothing left but to dive on in. Okay, so 20, 40, 60, 80, 100 sprues of the Rohan house, the classic super modular kit. That's some serious Rohan buildings. But it gets more ridiculous. 30, 60, 70 sprues of the Rohan watchtower and palisade kit. I think there's something like 20 meters of Rohan fortifications. This is gonna be an absolutely monster fortress of Rohan. But, I mean, we got all this plastic, I guess we better talk about what we're gonna build.
Rohan, the home of the Horse Lords, and famous to all Middle-earth fans for two epic locations, Helm's Deep, which we're smashing out already, and the incredible palisade-encircled city of Edoras. I've already built this city 3 times, but all of those builds pale in comparison to the majesty of the city brought to life by Tolkien and Jackson. So today, armed with our veritable arsenal of plastic crack, we're going to begin the ultimate Edoras superboard, encompassing every single part of the city, from the rolling hills and barrows before the outer gates, right up to the Golden Hall of Meduseld. But before we can get planning, we need to get working. So I set up a workstation before the walls of Helm's Deep, piled up with sprues and clippers and sorting tubs, and lit the beacons. My two mates James and Andy saw the beacon fire atop Island Arc and rode out from Christchurch into the mountainous wilderness of the South Island and spent a day with me snipping and chopping and cleaning up plastic crack. Now, longtime viewers of the channel will remember that it took me and 4 mates over 24 hours of labor to prepare just 70 sprues of the Gondor ruins for Osgiliath, but luckily in just 5 or 6 hours, Andy, Jimmy and I had smashed out 42 of our total 170 sprues of Rohan goodness. We focused first on the Rohan houses, which in and of themselves have a huge range of parts, wall tiles of various styles, thatched roofing, timber beams and gabling, not to mention lots of juicy Rohan gribblies. Now, with our first chunk of the mountain of plastic ready for assembly, it's time to think about the build itself. The city of Edoras is a classic palisade fortified city with a huge ring wall of timber and stone defenses encircling a rocky hilltop covered in buildings made from wood, stone and thatch. These buildings wind their way up the hillside to the very pinnacle upon which sits the royal court, and at the apex of the mighty landform, the Golden Hall of Meduseld, the royal seat of the Kingdom of Rohan. For the time being, our starting point is the generic structures and buildings for the lower city. We're going to need a lot of dwellings to fill out such a massive landscape, and we need to get to grips with just what these kits can do.
We've got a big pile of plastic, and I've got a new recruit to begin the assembly line, Adam from 3D Games.
There we go, ready to glue together some plastic buildings.
Yes, a lot of plastic buildings. Let's bring the city of Edoras to life.
Now, I have worked with these kits before, but not since 2020. To be honest, this whole experience was a huge nostalgia trip for me. The last time I plastic bashed these bad boys, we still lived in Australia, we had 0 out of 3 children, and my hair was only slightly flecked with grey. But one thing that hasn't changed is how awesome Ray Dranfield's glorious Rohan modular structures are. We decided to dive straight into making some pretty sizable buildings, using about 3 house sets worth of walls for each of our first 2 structures. With such a modular kit, it's a really fun challenge to try and make every single building unique, and we are embracing that task wholeheartedly, creating footprints and multi-story roof lines that are really unique, even cutting thatch down with the razor saw to get some different styles of roofing. The Rohan kits have 2 real sets of components: the primary walls, which come in a couple of sizes and textures, and then a single sheet of main size thatching, and then a set of smaller walls and thatching for little bolt-on structures that attach to the sides of the main walls. These can either sit flat against a double height main wall or mesh against a single story with a smaller thatch roof that slopes up against the main roof line. The main thing I've learnt about assembling these kits is to just not be too precious. Yes, the components do line up so that they can assemble with just plastic glue, but because I'm kit bashing so many parts beyond their intended uses, I have to add green stuff in to add extra thatching to blend various joints together. This is so easy by just jamming the green stuff onto the roof line and then scratching in some thatch with the scalpel. And once I unlocked this approach, I just started getting really loose, shooting from the hip with my assembly, just jamming cool stuff in anyway, and fixing anything that looks dodgy with good old Kneadertight.
Okay, so my first little building is looking absolutely solid. Green stuffed all of the different blends, and I've green stuffed Adam's second building because he's too bloody lazy to do it himself. We're gonna bulk this kind of structure out and get a few extra kind of awnings and gables that Adam's got ready for me here. And he's kicking off on building number 3. You gotta do a little guy, fella to love. Building number 3 is also coming along here, Adam.
It's just getting there.
Yep.
Getting there, bit by bit.
So I think these kind of bigger, medium-sized buildings are the real kind of ticket for the bulk of the landscape. And then we're gonna start experimenting with the palisade kits.
We pushed on through the afternoon, adding more and more details across all 3 of these mid-sized buildings. Extra gables, wooden beams, more thatch, and I think our approach is looking really solid. Now we just need a lot more buildings.
So our first kind of generic Rohani buildings are looking really good. Nice shapes, nice structures, but I want to get into that really screen-accurate stuff that was built out on location. And to do that, we need to leave the workshop and head somewhere even more special.
So we jumped in the car and headed out into the Misty Mountains, the rocky, snow-tipped wilderness of South Canterbury, and trekked up the Erewhon Valley to Mount Sunday, the filming location Peter Jackson used for Edoras. Before we hiked the peak itself, we nestled in on a little outcrop overlooking the Vale and the city of Rohan, and settled in for a day of crafting, and for once, some glorious weather. But as many long-time viewers will know, the weather out here in the Highlands can change very, very quickly.
Eat that and shut up. Behind us is Mount Sunday, the filming location for Edoras, and we're gonna try and build some really screen-accurate structures that match the actual set that they built out here on location. There was a big cluster of buildings across the top, but importantly, a section of gatehouse and thatch houses and barracks and little structures around the base of the rocky escarpment. So, it's time to get crafting.
Let's go.
So Adam and I instead had a good look at the reference in the back of the car, and then decided to see if we could knock up some even more advanced buildings. These thatch houses are all about the roof lines, and we thought of 2 ways that we could shake this up. So far, all of the roof lines have been at the top of a particular level, so I decided that I wanted a sloping roof line slung out over a balcony that joins hard up against a taller section of walls. Adam, on the other hand, wanted to try an absolutely bonkers multi-panel roof to capture the essence of some of the really large buildings that dominate the reference. I got stuck in building a multi-story structure and had this idea to make another kind of tiered layer, and realized that the wall tiles could be flipped on their sides to make some glorious floorboards. I don't want to do this too often, as we're going to need all of our wall tiles for, walls, but on this upper story, this is an awesome bit of variation for our build. I then glued in our roof line and added some pillars made from horsehead detailing, and built up and up for our top story to get even more variety for the roofline. Adam, meanwhile, was building some massive gabling to match his monster thatch roof. By alternating the direction of the wooden paneling, he managed to add a huge range of visual detail. Then after a visit from one of the locals who was extremely interested in our sprue, we tried to finish off our new roof lines with the last of the thatch paneling. I had a fair bit of success, but as the clock struck 3 p.m, the wind picked up insanely, as you can see all the swishing grass in this shot, and Adam's large roof panel kept trying to ride the wind down the valley and take Adam with it. So we retired to the car and finished off our buildings in the relative shelter of the boot. Adam's massive roofing was a bit of a challenge to keep the structural integrity, but with a bit of patience he got it holding together, and I added a few last details, and then it was time to make the big climb up to the filming location to truly capture the ultimate inspiration for this Edoras build.
So we're here at the base of Edoras, and this is where they built the physical set on these lower slopes, the gatehouse, some palisade wall, and a bunch of huts and Rohan structures as well. And this is really vital for our wargaming board, because this lower section is what we're going to build, as well as this big rocky escarpment and the royal court up on the top of the hill behind me. So 2 big locations joined together, covered in Rohan houses. But with this wind, I think we're done with crafting here today, but we're not quite finished with Edoras yet. Let's go up to the top.
I smell man flesh.
Only one of our buildings made it to the top of Edoras. Adam's would have blown apart, I think.
I think so, or taking us off the hill.
Yes, it was a bit of a parachute there. This guy's looking pretty sweet, but this is too windy. Let's get back to the studio. Goodbye, Edoras.
See you later.
Sadly, it was time to say bye to Adam, so I dropped him back to Christchurch Airport and jammed his bags full of Rohan kits so he can keep working on some crazy creations back in his own workshop. He'll have a video out very soon, so head on over to 3D Games, Wargaming and Terrain and check out his latest incredible gaming board and click subscribe so that you don't miss the big Rohan video when it drops. A massive thank you to Adam. This YouTuber life is actually a bit lonely sometimes, just solo crafting up here in the mountains, so it's amazing to have some company, and he's done some epic work here and has plans for some crazy Rohan stuff. Back in the workshop, it was time to dive into a whole new Rohan kit we haven't even touched yet, the palisades and watchtowers. Now these sprues have so many cool bits. We've got 16 of the bloody set, so there is something like 20 meters of walls here, towers, gates. Let's just say we've got enough resources to get creative. So I clipped off a couple of the sprues and then grabbed my latest building fresh from Edoras and started experimenting with the idea of combining the palisade components with the house kits to make some really cool fortified structures. A bunch of ideas kind of jumped out at me, inspired by the Rohan buildings from the old Battle for Middle-earth video games, and I kind of hacked up a big section of palisade to make some lovely spiky battlements for the flat platform, but then to make this extra spicy and super gameplay friendly, I wanted an external access up to this platform. So I cut down a small section of wall just shy of the length of the building and glued that hard up against that external wooden paneling, and then a few extra pieces of palisade to kind of neaten it all up and complete the battlements, and 2 ladders really sold the effect. To finish this guy up, he needed a heap of green stuff for all my kit-bashed thatch roofing, starting up on the top main roof, and then of course down on our lower roof to blend the top of that thatch into the wall above. I'm absolutely stoked on this little guy, and I'm really inspired to kind of take this approach and just make a whole bunch of buildings in this style that are almost like built into the exterior palisade walls, like barracks, archery ranges, armories, just to kind of really spice up the defensive gameplay for sieges.
This week has just been nuts. Weekly videos here on Zorpazorp is an absolute slog, and we only just made it Sunday night instead of my normal Friday, but it still counts. I did find some time though to add a couple of new Mega Zorptron statues to the Patreon honor wall. Every single one of my amazing Patreons goes up on a big sexy banner on this honor wall, and my Mega Zorptrons, for their extra special support, get a statue dedicated in their honor. King J got Ranger Faramir in a mossy stone finish, Ben got an Imperial Fist with heavy bolter with a marble finish, and Campbell Watts got an awesome ultramarine captain with a weathered mossy stone. If you want to see a statue up on the wall in your honor, pick a model out from my bits box, pick the finish, stone, marble, bronze, gold. Go and check out the Patreon down in the description. It's an awesome way to support the channel. Seriously, without the Patrons, none of this will be possible. A huge thank you to all of my Patrons, and stay tuned. Some massive updates for all the banners on the honor wall coming very soon.
Next, while I had the green stuff out, I jumped back to one of our earlier buildings, the third beast that I never kind of properly showed to you guys, who just needed a bunch of thatch blending all around the little extra roofs, which just came up beautifully. And then it was time for Adam's big Edoras building. First, a few horsehead struts to add detail to the pretty flat end plate, which for some reason just doesn't line up perfectly when you use double-length roofing, but I mean, this looks way better anyway. And then I wanted to add one classic detail which can be seen in a lot of the buildings in the wide shots of Edoras. A really kind of flat thatch roof with no gables or awnings, but a little central chimney port for smoke from a big central hearth or fire pit to rise up and escape. I used a series of sloped timber walls and small thatch plates with a bunch of green stuff to get it all working, and then glued it straight onto the large thatch plates. A bunch of green stuff to blend all of that in was kind of essential, and then I love the idea of like a little service platform with some ladders so the occupant of our large hall can climb up and adjust the chimney flue.
So here, nestled in next to Helm's Deep, we have everything that Adam and I have built so far. And here's something I prepared earlier. These are my original Rohan buildings that I made way back in 2020. And our next task, I guess, is to grab these and make them look like these. But that's not all I have at my disposal. This is the original gatehouse from my very first Edoras build. A relic, an heirloom of ages past, ready to join the final Zorpazorp Edoras superboard. This is a fair amount now, and I've got 40 houses left. I've only used 10 of the new kits, about kind of 18 or so total. So I still have 40 Rohan houses, not to mention all the palisade walls, which are ready to link up with this gorgeous gatehouse. This board is going to be massive. Might have bitten off more than I can chew here.
I slapped down the new buildings outside and gave them a big prime in Rust-Oleum dark grey, and then a very gentle zenithal from above, just a spritzing to start building up some mottled texture as well as our light source. And then I got them back in the workshop and gave the entire buildings a massive dry brush with light grey to really accent all of the raised details. I'm actually following my own painting guide from like 5 years ago, which is just a bizarre experience, but really handy to have because I cannot remember how I painted the first ones. Sometimes it is just so useful filming every little thing that I do. Of course, following guides always relies on having the right paints, which I don't. My skeleton horde that is kind of crucial is basically empty, so I had to mix up some replacements, combining Seraphim Sepia and Agrax Earthshade through the airbrush instead of by a normal brush to give us the right similar kind of base tone for the thatching. This goes down everywhere, and a lovely kind of inconsistent application through the airbrush is beginning to really build up a lovely mottled look, perfect for such a natural material like thatching. And of course the shades, they're so thin, they just glaze over all of that dry brushed raised detail we put in earlier. Then it's the exact same technique for the wood, but this time I blended 2 brown washes with a bit more green running through them, rather than red like the thatch. These are Athonian Camo Shade and Mortarian Grime. Having some greens through the wood and base tones really helps them read realistically once we start applying more layered dry brushes over the top. Our final layer for today was a quick bone dry brush over all of the thatch to accent that raised detail and start working towards that classic golden Rohan yellow. I'm going to finish all of these buildings properly once I've got the entire city ready for paint, but I thought that you guys deserve to see everything we've got so far for the city of Edoras in a more finished state.
Now this doesn't look like that much. This is just a small village really, but this is only a fifth of our total Rohan house kits, not to mention there's 15 meters of unused palisade walls. Once we add in a big complex landform with rock molds and scenics, not to mention all those unused plastic kits, Edoras is going to be mighty indeed. Every single week from now until Christmas, I have brand new Middle-earth videos dropping right here on Zorpazorp. The next 2 months are going to be bigger than the Osgiliath explosion of 2022. So come on this journey with me. Like, subscribe, throw me a comment, join the Patreon if you can, and let's build Middle-earth together.